The right tries to maintain this idea that there's a constitution and that we have rights and these things are being upheld. But when every major institution is corrupt, you just got a group of conservatives who are like, there's a constitution as long as it stands. And it's like, bro, you live in the past. Like Hollywood, schools, like the CRT and school stuff is a perfect example. Absolute corruption. The media then lies to cover up the extreme stuff they're pulling off. Let me pull up the story right here. Florida shares examples of critical race theory in banned textbooks. What? Me racist? More than 2 million people have tested their racial prejudice, reads one textbook's math problem. So Florida got rid of a bunch of math books because they said they had critical race theory indoctrination in them. Now, prominent progressives and leftists are saying the right is banning math because they don't want people to learn math. What you actually see in these books is it says things like, the bar graph shows the differences among age groups on the implicit association test that measures levels of racial prejudice. Higher scores indicate a stronger bias. What does that have to do with math? Why are they showing these graphs? Adding and subtracting polynomials. What? Me racist? More than 2 million people have tested their racial prejudice online using a version of the implicit association test. Many groups' average scores fall between slight and moderate bias. That's in a math book. When they remove those books from school, Democrats, corporate press, and progressive activists make up insane lies.
Yeah, but everybody, I mean, it's all propaganda. You have propaganda on both sides. And
I mean, this is a math book, though. This is like a grade school math book.
Okay. Where is that book? Is it all over America? Is it
Florida.
in all the schools now?
Florida statewide.
The textbooks have gotten pretty crazy.
So Florida is one of 50 states, okay? I think, these
it's happening
sweepingly
all over the place. It's like Virginia, for example.
Okay, but there's a little bit of broad sweeping generalization here. I mean, I have more faith in our world than believing that all this stuff is going to stick. Some of it's going to buff out, Tim.
Well, yeah, because people have started to stand up and say no.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's mostly only in Florida, right? So Disney comes out and what's happening in Florida, if you're not familiar, is they passed a bill called the Parental Rights and Education Bill, which grants parents the right to know.
Yes, I know.
Now, what happens immediately is
don't say gay.
But the bill nowhere in any way has anything to do with that.
Right.
The bill is just, certain sex ed concepts for kindergarten to third grade, not allowed. And the teachers can't keep secrets from the parents on physical, mental, or medical issues. Parents have a right to know what's in their curriculum. The media comes out and says, don't say gay. That's not true. The only people fighting back against this are, for the most part, in Florida. We did see after this, I think, Texas, Idaho, Mississippi. We're starting to see statewide hyperpolarization to push back, but it's really polarizing. So a better example is probably abortion, where Oklahoma, I think, outright banned abortion, just literally banned it, unless it's for the life of the mother. And Colorado now allows abortion up to the point of birth, meaning a fully developed 9-month-old baby can be...
Two extremes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is what's happening in this country. So it's not that it's buffing out, it's that the lines that there's two distinct cultures that have emerged. And
I
they
know,
hate
but
each other.
that for right now, and this is what happens historically, and everything moves. It doesn't stay in the same place. And having conversations and arguments and providing a forum for debate is what we have to keep going.
So the left, as I guess it would be colloquially described, won't come on a show like this.
Well, that's why I came on the show.
Who is the left? Who
so
is it?
typically, there's left is a reference to tribal spheres of influence, as is right. It doesn't really mean much of anything.
I just mean who have you asked? Well, no, we can't get into that.
So there's a lot of people.
It's funny you say that because recently there have been a couple of invitations.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. So one of the most notable is one of the biggest political streamers for the left is Hassan Piker, who I've repeatedly invited on the show, but he's always got a different excuse. The first time it was, I tweeted out, we invite these people on the show. They always say yes and then ghost us. And then Hassan tweets out, I'll come on your show. I said, we will pay for everything. We'll get you a hotel. We'll bring you out in style. Then he privately messages me saying, I'm scared of COVID. I won't do it. Now he's saying, I'm not going to travel to your show. I'm too busy. We recently had another guy that I was that was arguing and posting outright lies. And it's just insane that these people, I'll tell you how crazy it is. I'm holding up a pen, right? You can see it?
Yeah.
I'm not holding a pen. That's what they do. The Washington Post published the private address of someone on Twitter. You can see it. And they're going, no, they didn't. And you're like, why am I even talking to you if you're just going to say something so absurd?
You just have to find other people. There's
no other people.
There have to be other people. Did you watch the French, Macron and
Le Pen.
Now, they were given, this is the way we should debate things. They're each given I don't know what it is, like an hour and a half. And there's no you have 30 seconds to answer this question. And they insult each other, they talk to each other, but they have enough time to actually have a conversation. So this is which is a debate.
Which is
instead of a soundbite here and there.
Yeah. So that's why we have this 2.5 hour long show. Now shout out to Vosh. He's a leftist socialist YouTuber who a lot of people on the right hate, especially because of his views on children and adult content for children. But he came on the show twice. And that's pretty much. There's also Jen Perlman. Shout out to Jen. She's a progressive, and she's come on the show. And we've had great conversations. But this guy who was recently arguing that something that literally happened didn't, messaging me saying he'll come on the show. I say, here, email us so we can set it up, and then he ghosts us. It's a recurring thing.
Well, that's cowardly.
I think, Mom, what it is so. We talked earlier before the show about are we inheriting the tail end of the counterculture progressive movement that you guys initiated in the late 60s. And I think to a certain extent, what we're talking about here, when you say what is the left, I mean, to a certain extent, it has become orthodoxy of this kind of monolithic, mainstream idea of what it is to be a good person, to be a moral, virtuous person. And so anybody who engages with a Tim Pool is stepping outside of that orthodoxy, and nobody wants to be that person who steps outside of where everybody is thinking right and doing.
But I did, and a lot of my old friends won't talk to me or don't talk to me. They unfollow me and stuff because it's Ian's a part of the fascist movement of the United States. Where I'm like, yo, the Federal Reserve. Shout out to everyone in the chat that loves that one. Is fascist. I'm trying to expose that stuff.
And continue, please. The establishment. I guess we call it the establishment. They just outright make things up, right?
I think that left and right is a communist. I mean, it goes back to the French Revolution, where people sat on the left, they were the revolutionaries. People sat on the right, they were the loyalists. And so it really literally comes from, they called themselves the left and the right of the aisle. Mao talked a lot about the rightists, and he persecuted the rightists in the Cultural Revolution of China. And so I think that somehow they've wormed that into our modern discourse to get us to divide each other.
I look at, we just had The Masked Singer. Do you guys see this? Rudy Giuliani turned out to have been the Masked Singer. Wow. And who was the guy's name?
Yeah, there's that show, The Masked Singer.
There's a show called Masked Singer where someone wears a costume and sings.
Okay.
And then they have to guess who it was.
Weird show.
Turns out the mask comes
Never
off.
heard of it.
Rudy Giuliani.
He's got a beautiful voice, turns out.
Well, so I think it was Ken Jeong. Was that his name?
Oh, yeah.
He walks off stage. I thought about that because people have said that Twitter isn't real life for a long time. That social media isn't real life. And I think the real issue is that Twitter has always been real life, but for a younger generation. What I see happening now is when you look at cable TV, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, their viewers are overwhelmingly over 56 years old. Mm-hmm. So all of this stuff is happening. It is worse than I've ever seen it. Granted, I'm only 36. And I feel like the older generation doesn't understand how bad it is because they're not actually in the same culture as the rest of us.
That's possible. That's quite possible. Yeah.
So for Richie to experience things on the ground, I'll give you one of my favorite examples of the hyperpolarization is a man named Daryl Davis. Oh, yeah. He's an old black jazz musician. He thought to himself one day, how could someone hate me if they never met me? Mm-hmm. So he went to a Klan rally, met some old Klansmen, started talking to him, and he said, sure enough, they were racist. But after a few weeks to a few months, these guys started taking off their robes and saying I was completely wrong. They were like, the things they say about black people does not represent my good friend Daryl. Mm-hmm. He told one story about how he met this Klansman who was high ranking, and he had this dream to see this famous rock and roll car in a museum or something like that. And Daryl's like, oh, I can get you in there. And he was like, get out of here. And then here he is, this racist guy, having his dream come true, granted to him by a black man. And these people were like, all of a sudden, like, this racist stuff is wrong. So this Daryl Davis We booked him. He's incredible. I'm a huge fan.
How old is he?
I'll
find out.
I'm not sure. He's going to be here actually.
Yeah, he'll be here soon.
And we booked him for an event to headline because the event was about essentially civil libertarianism. It was called Ending Violence, Racism, and Authoritarianism. We wanted people to be like, we want to get rid of this stuff. Far left extremists showed up and threatened to burn down the theater. So the theater canceled our contract within, I think it was like 3 weeks of the event. We were forced to move the event to a casino with half the capacity because the casino had the security and they were willing to do it. Another venue nearby told us, we love what you're doing, but we will have our venue burned down if we host this conversation. The protesters showed up to the after party, and Daryl Davis, having de-radicalized over 200 Klansmen, said, I'm going to go talk to these guys and see what's up. And you know what they did? They screamed at him and wouldn't let him say one word. He was so shocked, he wrote this post on Facebook where he said, I can't believe it. I've never experienced anything like this. What is going on with these people? And it ended up going massively viral because the current state of politics in this country is the younger left generation. We call it the left, whatever we call it, Group A, Group B, whatever. They are unwilling to compromise, unwilling to talk. They are angry, chaotic, and destructive. So, for example, the guy who said the Washington Post never posted a private address and everyone's showing the image of them doing it. And he's like, no, they didn't. These are people who don't care about what's true. They know that they can say it and they're people gullible enough to just believe it. And that gives them power. So you have, it was the late David Graeber who said, elements of the left have adopted the fascistic tenet, there is no truth but power. And this guy was called the anarchist anthropologist. He was one of the progenitors of Occupy Wall Street. He later in his life, he said, I'm watching the left embrace fascistic tenets. Yeah. And that's where we are now, where the corporate press will outright make something up. Their allies and nonprofits will make things up. The whole insurrection narrative, all of this stuff are outright lies. My favorite example in this capacity is that in January, I said, it's going to be very difficult to convict someone of trespassing at the Capitol when the police opened the doors for them. The Young Turks then make up a lie that I said people who are violent shouldn't be charged because there were no signs,
right.
And it works for their audience. I invite them on the show. I say, we'll cover all your costs. We've known each other for years. They laugh and they say, of course not. We don't care. We don't actually care about this stuff.
Daryl Davis is 64 years old, by the way.
Okay.
Just turned 64 in March. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point, though, Tim, is like it's like a lack of any initiative to engage with the other side. And I'm wondering, like, back in the 60s and 70s, like, you know, somebody who was like Bible thumping, you know, whatever, World War II veteran who had the white picket fence, and then their kid went off to Vietnam, and they were all, you know, were you not willing to engage with somebody like that? Like, was it, you know, if you're this, then I won't even talk to you?
I think, you know, when earlier we talked about it being more generational than partisan, because we were filled with hope about the fact that we could make a change, we could make a difference, we could end the war. And if it might have been naive, but that's how we united. And we disagreed. I mean, Richard Nixon was the enemy because he perpetuated the war. And
but would you talk to a Nixon supporter? Like, because I think that's the
I
same
tried
mentality.
to talk to my father about it.
Well, the feminists today are pro-war.
What do you? That's a broad generalization.
But it's true.
What do you mean? I'm a feminist. I'm not pro-war.
Right. So my generation's feminists are pro-war.
Yeah, it's
But
weird.
not all of them.
It's very
Well,
weird.
I mean, I didn't say absolutely. I'm saying if you were to take 10 modern feminists right now and ask them if they wanted intervention in Ukraine, they'd say yes.
That's probably a fair point.
Absolutely. Donald Trump got us the Abraham Accords.
I'm so confused now about everything.
There's like
My head is
third
spinning.
wave feminism from 1994. There's fourth wave feminism from 2010. So you got to be specific.
Well, I'll put it this way. Either tacitly or directly pro-war for our generation's feminists, right? The people who would wear those pink hats right now are the ones with the Ukraine flags in their bios, and they're the ones that
I don't think that's absolutely true. My
Well, I didn't say
niece
absolute.
wore one of those pink hats.
Right, so I'm not saying absolutely. I'm
And,
saying
you know, she didn't. What?
If you take 10 of these people and ask them, do you think the U.S. should be involved in the Ukraine-Russia war? They'll say yes.
I think.
Chris
just
Coons,
a
a Democratic
postulation.
senator, said it's time for U.S. boots on the ground.
Yeah.
You've
I mean,
got-
it's a
you've
paradigm
got-
shift. It's a paradigm shift.
Right.
There are still plenty of those hippie
But-
granola folks. Those are they're also like anti-vax. A lot of those people.
Yeah.
you know?
But take a look at this point. With Donald Trump, no new wars. For the first time in my life, a president did not start a war. In fact, with Kushner's guidance, we got the Abraham Accords, which brought economic stability between countries like Saudi Arabia or just countries with Israel. So now planes are allowed to fly over Israel. Tremendous peace. There was also, I think, what else was it? Was it Bosnia? He had that other peace agreement. He was withdrawing our troops from Afghanistan. He was getting our troops out of Syria. He was generally making moves to end war. And that's one of the reasons I did not vote for him in 2016, but I did in 2020, because he's had a timeline for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But today's feminists of my generation oppose that. And they voted for Joe Biden, who was part of an administration that caused, I think, started 7 wars. So whether tacitly or directly, and tacitly I say, you look at Donald Trump's body of work as an activist and you say, I'd rather vote for the guy who starts war as opposed to the guy who ends them. They're pro-war. That's tacit. Now, the direct stuff is the people who right now are aligning with Democrats saying they want intervention in Ukraine. Malcolm Nance, I mean, he's an MSNBC host, went to Ukraine. He's 60 years old, and he's got a picture of himself holding a gun in tactical gear. These people are outright pro-war.
Well, I think that they think if we go in, we'll end the war, which is why
that's
they want to get
pro-war.
involved.
It's not a United States issue.
Yeah, but neither was World War II until
No,
the Germans posed a real threat.
We're talking about
Paris.
It's a regional conflict.
So was World War II.
If Vladimir Putin invades Poland, NATO can intervene. Ukraine is not a NATO country. It is not an EU country, and they have a conflict with Russia. And you have Democrats and the our generation's left saying intervention, war, weapons, etc. I mean, it's absolutely insane. The arguments I'm hearing from progressives are that we should have a no-fly zone, which is a declaration of war on Russia.
Yeah, I think they're misguided.
But
A lot of them are.
It's like, it's almost as if, I mean, that is kind of embedded in exactly what you said, is kind of the substance of a paradigm shift, which is like, it used to be the right that was always reactionary and always responding from what the left did. And, whatever they do, we have to oppose because we need to retain our traditions and values. But now it's like, it's almost like once Donald Trump took control of the Republican Party, it's like the left has to react to everything that they do and say, no, that's got to be
But
bad.
it was Trump and Bernie.
Yeah.
Trump and Bernie were a generational flip that just shocked the whole system. Now, Bernie lost, and Hillary won that primary. Donald Trump stormed his way into the Republican Party and brought with him a wave of, very much a shift from the traditional conservative model to a more left economic.
What about
moderate
North
policy.
Korea and the fact that he was palsy-walsy with?
That's fantastic. I nearly cried when he was negotiating peace. My great grandfather is from what would now be called North Korea, and the prospect of de-escalation was fascinating. And Trump was negotiating that. Donald Trump crossed into North Korean territory with no security.
Yep.
That was one of the most profound
Plus, like,
anti-war moments of my life.
we've been palsy-walsy with the Saudi Arabians for generations,
No, I
and nobody's
know.
called that into question because it's not one of the.
But just think about this: Donald Trump crossed into North Korea with no security and walked peacefully up with Kim Jong-un, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, they could have snatched him up. They could have grabbed him and said, now you give us what we want. They shook his hand. He walked back. They smiled and waved, and he left. And I said, that is leadership. Donald Trump risked his life. Now, I get it. The threat is backed by we have nuclear bombs, but we are not going to mutually assured destruction, they always say. No, Donald Trump, I couldn't believe he did that. The guy they claim is the most selfish and insane guy in the world just risked his life. For what point? I was just like, it would be a profound moment for me to hear that the Korean Peninsula had been reunited, and Donald Trump made tremendous steps in that direction. I don't think it was perfect. I think Kim Jong-un is a bad guy. I think they took advantage of Trump in many ways, but that was incredible.
I'm looking at just as clarification. It looks like Bosnia wasn't involved in the peace deal, but it was Serbia and Kosovo.
Sorry, right.
Kosovo
Yeah,
deal.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Man, these peace deals.
Yeah, I do have a lot of issues with Trump. He definitely wasn't perfect, but it's nice to see somebody that's not part of the war machine.
But
come out.
look at the people who came out and were like, oh, the Obama administration, the ones who signed the indefinite detention provisions in the National Defense Authorization Act, Barack Obama, who authorized extrajudicial assassinations of American citizens, and they were like, I would rather have that guy, his vice president, than Donald Trump, who signed peace agreements and fought and worked towards ending conflict internationally, no new wars. And they voted for Joe Biden. The left is profoundly pro-war.
When do you think that happened? Was it like, so you just mentioned Bosnia, like during the Bosnia War, the American public, right? They were pretty for intervention, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was Clinton. Is that when it flipped? When the left wing started to become pro-war? Like, because you were anti-war, you were progressive in the '60s. How did that change? You know, how, like, why is
2008.
You think it was 2008?
George W. Bush. I remember marching in protests over the war in Iraq. And I was a teenager, so I knew very little for the most part about what was going on other than why are we invading this war over weapons of mass destruction and all that stuff. And we were told it wasn't true. People were marching with signs saying George W. Bush was Hitler and all that. And I was mostly just kind of like, yeah, punk rock. Ooh, screw the system. George W. Bush is bad. And boy, was it a cold splash of water when we did it. Barack Obama got elected. And then I said, all right, well, the first thing Obama did, one of the first orders he signed was bombing a village full of women and children. Yeah. And I said, guys, hey, let's keep this protest going. They went, no, we're good. And they all disappeared. All these anti-war protesters were gone. I think what happened was, this is the emergence of overt tribalism. Around the same time, Facebook and Twitter and these other social networks started emerging, and people developed tribal identities, which is, I support Barack Obama. That's who I am. I don't care what he does. And for me, I was kind of like, I think killing children is bad.
So what are you referring to? I'm not sure I remember.
Barack Obama?
Yeah.
Barack Obama authorized a drone strike on a civilian restaurant in Yemen, killing a 16-year-old American citizen named Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. And the response from the White House when asked about it was, oops, we were trying to kill a different terrorist by bombing a civilian restaurant. Just so turns out, though, Anwar al-Awlaki, his dad, was an American citizen who was also killed in an extrajudicial assassination signed off by Obama. And to me, it sounded like Obama was sending a signal, we will kill your children. That's just my opinion. All that matters is I won't speculate. In the absence of evidence, the solution which makes the least amount of assumptions tends to be correct. Barack Obama authorized the assassination of an American citizen by bombing a civilian cafe. And people voted for him again. I didn't. And people voted for his VP over Donald Trump.
I voted for him twice.
So here you have a guy who is quite literally killing not only children in these countries under the Obama administration. In order to get around the fact that it was being reported they were executing civilians by drone, they said, if the male is over 18, we don't care what they're doing. Carrying water, harvesting crops, raising goats, they're enemy combatants because they're military age. When our good friend Luke Rudkowski confronted the administration on the execution of the American citizen, I can't remember the guy's name, was it Charlie Gibbs? He said he should have had a better father. That was their attitude. And so I sit here, I watch all of this stuff, and then I say, I have always maintained that I think this is disgusting. Since the George W. Bush era, I have learned my lesson with voting for people like Obama. When Donald Trump came around with Hillary Clinton, I laughed. You think I'm voting for Trump? Nice try. Hillary Clinton? She's a warmonger to beat out all warmongers. She didn't get my vote either. And then in Donald Trump's presidency, we saw a return of American manufacturing. We saw a $3 billion investment in Michigan. We saw a challenging of the racist policies coming out of critical race theory. And we saw no new wars. We saw historic peace agreements and attempts at other historic peace agreements. And I said, I got to vote for this guy. He needs another term. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.